Okay, so we have finally hit the finale of season 1 of Servant, titled Balloon. So this episode actually opens up with Sean, and we see that placenta of Jericho's that we saw in the flashback. He finally takes it out of the freezer and he decides he's going to serve it at the after party of Jericho's baptism. And in this opening narration of Sean's, he's explaining the different beliefs about what to do with the baby's placenta, what it actually means, how it can help postpartum depression, and this kind of is a lend into the guilt that's added up to Sean over this incident with Dorothy. But, you know, those thoughts of like, what if I gave her the baby's placenta? Would this have happened? You start thinking those kind of things with trauma. So this, to me, him making the placenta for the party was kind of just a path for him to get that out of his system, face it in a way, and begin again, kind of going off of the baptism and starting over. So when everyone gets back from the baptism, what I thought really worked in this episode was this girl coming in with a doll baby. And when Dorothy actually sees this doll baby, the Amber Alert starts going off on people's phones. So it kind of adds this heightened suspense to this episode. You wondering, wait a minute, is that Amber Alert for this mysterious baby of Jericho? And the doll being set up at the same time is great because it's like, oh no, that's exact trigger for Dorothy here to kind of snap her out of her daze. And this scene when she's with the little girl on the staircase, and the girl says to Dorothy, she's not a dolly, she's Pamela. And it's Dorothy facing the reality of the situation now and what she was doing. And it's kind of in front of her, seeing it, a little girl doing it. And it's triggering her because it's the same spot she sat in with her version of the doll. And in reaction, she just drops it. And this is a nice touch because it also will foreshadow the ending of this episode, literally the last shot when she drops and fully comes full circle, realizing she has this baby doll in her house. And that's just layer this episode did so beautifully, where episode 9, we see the flashback of the trauma that Dorothy went through, and now this episode jumps to current time and we see her kind of breaking through the denial she's been covered up by everyone around her and what actually happened, and coming to face it again. So seeing the other news anchor, the blonde one that Sean said was hot, she adds humor this episode where she's eating this placenta and says it's delicious, and Toby says it's Sean's special recipe and that it's a liver. And I do feel like having this anchor come into the episode makes me think she'll be a bigger player in season 2. I'm going to guess that she's going to be the forbidden fruit for Sean and his wandering eyes, especially with her having the line talking about, how could Dorothy afford this place? What does her husband do? He must be loaded. And just some really tight writing here too, with Dorothy's friend telling Leanne one day Dorothy's going to snap out of this and blame all of us for what we did and not making her face what really happened and just kind of feeding her denial. And why that's such great writing is because it kind of just highlights in your head subconsciously where we're going with this episode and what we're setting up, in that in the end of this episode to lead into a season 2. The exciting thing is going to see Dorothy's reaction now to finally again realizing what happened that day. And is she going to go AWOL on Sean and Julian and these people she loves? Okay, so we also get now a new character introduction in Aunt May, who was talked about in an earlier episode that she was even crazier than Leanne's uncle. And she's in the room with Jericho. Leanne walks into them. At the same time, the uncle appears now to Sean in the wine cellar. We see Sean finally offer him the money that him and Julian have been raising up, thinking he would want that. Clearly, we knew this uncle wasn't that type of person. And just, again, humorous moments, just seeing this weird dude smell the money was hysterical to me. But he's like, do you know who you welcomed into your home, Sean? So the editing was really good back and forth here, going between the uncle talking to Sean and Leanne talking to Aunt May. And Aunt May, we cut to, says to Leanne, what did she do? Talking about Dorothy. And then the uncle is telling Sean, but really informing the audience about Leanne's situation in that fire that Julian was onto, and saying that after the fire, it was easier for people to think Leanne died, and we just took upon to raise her in Pennsylvania. But he says Leanne never stopped talking about that day she met Dorothy. And this is alluding to the footage we saw in the middle of the season where Leanne actually met Dorothy as a kid. And you see, he says the line about she was telling Leanne stories, tucking her in after prayer. So this explains why Leanne is obsessed with these tapes of Dorothy and still goes to bed at night watching them. And it all comes full circle. And this was probably also her role model of just normal life and a normal woman that she didn't have in her life because she's being raised by a cult, we find out. So it explains her obsession with Dorothy more, why she wanted to be the nanny for this house in particular. And he says here, Leanne likes to please the ones she loves and make suffer the ones she hates. This also just perfectly explains her mindset when we first met her, where she loved Dorothy. She was already an obsessive super fan. and wanted to help her through her suffering and her trauma with this baby. And in the meantime, she's given Sean splinters. She's taken away his feeling to taste, knowing for a chef that would be so problematic. And then with Leanne here, she says to Aunt May, with a different tone than we last saw her talking about Dorothy, she says it was an accident. It wasn't his time to go. But Aunt May's like, God had a path for Dorothy and wanted her to suffer. But you thought you knew better. She's going to hurt him again, meaning Jericho, and she's gonna hurt you. So this just clearly, which we already get really basically confirmed later in the episode, is that Leanne took it upon herself to make Dorothy end her suffering because she loved Dorothy even before she knew her, and give her her baby back that she lost. And it explains Leanne being the one to cause this baby to come back to life. But in stories like this, with a supernatural element, there's always a sacrifice to doing something like that. And what I'm wrapping around with this whole episode kind of explained is in the next line where the uncle says to Sean, Leanne did something bad, and even says, you know whose baby it is. So that's got to be that it is just Jericho reformed. What I'm getting from this is that when Leanne was doing the splinters to Sean, doing the appetite loss, these got to be some kind of sacrifices to keep this baby alive in its new form, like a blood sacrifice. And that what we see going on with the uncle here is that when he's saying to Sean, do you really want your baby back? And he's like, yeah, I want him to stay. I want my son back, Jericho. I believe the uncle is the one who caused him now to not feel touch, not Leanne. And that happened when he was holding Sean, because it would be something to sacrifice more to keep the Jericho baby alive, I believe. But you see, Aunt May's a tough cookie here. She's telling Leanne, we help the righteous, the ones whose prayers should be answered. And Leanne's like, who says they don't deserve a second chance? And there's a big line here where Aunt May says to Leanne, come home, both of you. Meaning her and Jericho. No more dolls, no more pretending, as it was meant to be. You are our servant, title of the show finally, not hers. So this is the messed up situation too, where this powerful cult leader in Aunt May, that she's raised Leanne with this guy. We don't even know if they're really her aunt and uncle. They might have just been a cult that took this girl who survived a fire. They might have caused the fire of her family and knew there was something special about her, and they've just made her abilities their servant. And they're clearly messed up people who do bad things, and it seems like Leanne wanted to get away from that and do good with her powers. Now, Dorothy's father makes this speech at the party about mistakes and that we're all human. A wrong step, a look the other way. Amber alerts he's referring to, that's even happening in this episode. So he's kind of making the case where people were debating last week about how much is Dorothy to blame? Is she not to blame at all? Is she to blame fully for what happened with the baby? And he's kind of that voice and reason, that team of people on that side of like, it is just what you would say a mistake. So they do a good job too at showing the scales of those debates with an Aunt May on the extreme side, and then you could look at her father on the more sympathetic side. Now where it gets really interesting is when Dorothy recognizes Aunt May twice in this episode, and it clicks to her to go back and look at her own news footage. And props to Tony Bascalop here, the writer and creator of the show. He wrote every episode, and for him to brilliantly use the footage of Dorothy and have this all laid out and make sense so far down the road is great. And I always appreciate someone who has a vision the whole way and doesn't just go episode by episode winging it. You clearly see this was well thought out. And Dorothy plays the tape. It's when she covered this incident with this standoff with the police and this cult, and the leader's May Markham, aka Aunt May. They say they had children at this place. And we even see footage that keeps playing on the TV that this ended in explosions, this standoff. But before we even jump back to Dorothy's reaction to all this, I just want to hit on too how they show the Amber Alert was just a red herring, and that was actually the girl with the doll that was missing, not Jericho. And Sean says to Julian, I prayed for him to be back. I know my son when I hold him. She brought him back, talking about Leanne. And they did such a good job of showing Sean and his hand bleeding in that wound he didn't even feel himself make with the champagne cork. And it was so cool to have his last shots in this episode and of the season just toying with the idea of really seeing if he fully can't feel by putting his hand on that flame. And now Leanne, I think they're trying to trick you here a bit because she's whipping herself again. This is what she does when she feels guilty, sinful. But I think they're trying to make you think that it's her feeling bad about maybe giving Sean this punishment of not being able to feel. But again, I don't think that was her. I think that was the uncle. I think this is her whipping herself, knowing she's leaving with this baby and is gonna really mess up their lives now even more. And there's a nice touch here with Toby and this balloon, title of the episode, with the bottle of wine, 2 glasses, almost like what could have been for Leanne. This direction she really wanted to go, and why she would imitate Dorothy and try to just act like almost a normal, more sane person, and then maybe have a boyfriend like a Toby. And that's why she takes the balloon with her, and a life away from this cult she just dreams of. And what's interesting is when Dorothy and Sean were also at the end here looking at the baby before Leanne takes it away, and Dorothy's like, I almost don't don't believe he is real. And Sean's like, he is real. He's Jericho. So this is Sean's coming full circle, is all in. This is the baby. And they do a purposeful shot here where he looks up real quick and looks at that like voodoo cross of Leanne's. It's almost like he's getting converted too now to this cult behavior, or witchcraft as you would say, because he knows something's going on now with the uncle and Leanne and their supernatural effects, and he's in. So it could also set up Sean now and where he'll go next season in his character of like, maybe from being the most uptight guy and non-believer to actually getting into this and seeing how it brought his son back. But you see this poor private eye outside is cornered by the crazies. I guess he's gone. And you see Leanne goes outside to them, her cult, and they all hug her, and then they just kind of vanish. So back to when Dorothy looks at this footage of Aunt May, she has this huge shocking moment. There's this cult leader who's been in her house, and when Dorothy runs into the room with the baby crib, she gets the flashes that day, and someone in a hazmat suit with this baby Jericho when he was dead. And then it just beautifully closes with Dorothy now holding the baby doll that's in here, realizes Jericho's gone, drops the baby, realizing that there even was a baby doll in this house in the first place. And also gonna make her question, was it a doll the whole time now? It was she in her own head in a way creating it to be real. She might be even doubting herself, but what's fully clearly happening here in general is that she's just having this realization of what had happened with Jericho on that original day. And this is a good way to set up season 2 for her plot line and her character now to, okay, she was in denial about what happened the whole season, and now she's facing it again. She's full on snapped into it and has to now deal with it. And it's going to be interesting to see how she reacts. Why have you guys not snapped me out of this? So, as a finale, I'm giving it a 9.5. I thought it was really well done. I still preferred the last 2 episodes better. I think those were the more masterpiece types, but this was really good. It had the difficult job of, in 30 minutes, resolving things, but also setting up season 2, and it leaned heavy into setup. But really, you got most of your questions answered here, which is great, especially for a show like this, because people get pissed off you end a full season, you don't give many answers. They gave a lot here. And in the last episode, so you should be satisfied with that. Now, looking ahead to season 2, am I a little worried? Sure. I mean, you go into cult storylines, they've been done so much, and it can be worrisome. It's like, okay, how does this show survive now that that mystery of what happened to the baby's gone, but also that this show was so strong in being such a closed set in this small house with these characters, and it was intimate. Now, if we're going to see scenery wherever Leanne goes, how is that going to work? How is this show going to grow into that? Will it work? Will it be the same? It's so hard to live up to this, so I don't expect that. I think there'll definitely be a decline in quality, but if M. Night's saying they have a vision for 4 seasons planned out, I mean, so far so good. Hopefully there's a good, strong end game to this and where we're going, and that season 2 will live up to the hype it's inevitably going to have when people catch on to this show. Obviously, what's hurting it is because it's on Apple TV and not many people are seeing it, but as the word goes out, this is going to be a hit that might just take a little while to catch on to the public and the general eye. But if you're watching this video, you're one of the early birds, and I'm happy to have watched all these episodes with you guys. And thank you, everyone, for all your thoughts and your insights. And I really love to hear them specifically for this finale. So let me know what you thought of it. If you didn't like it, you did. And everyone, please be civil with each other. All good. We're all here together. And we're all passionate. Just keep it cool with each other. That's all. And yeah, please subscribe so you don't miss one of my reviews. I'm doing The Outsider right now. I'll be doing Better Call Saul. I'll also be doing that show Devs that's coming out on Hulu. And I also do celebrity interviews, so you don't want to miss those. And please follow me at Steve Varley1 on Twitter and Instagram for more of me. And I'll see you next time.